Jake Williams stood in the empty classroom, tears streaming down his face as he stared at the paper in his hands. Another F. His 15th failed exam this year. But this wasn't just any test. This was his final chance to pass 8th grade. And he had failed it too. The red ink seemed to burn his eyes as he read the teacher's note. See me immediately. We need to discuss your future at prestigious academy. His hands shook as he crumpled the paper. In just 2 hours, his father, billionaire tech mogul Robert Williams, would arrive for the parent-teacher conference that would decide everything. Jake knew what would happen. The disappointed look, the angry words, maybe even getting sent away to military school, just like his father always threatened. But then, something strange happened. As Jake wiped his tears, he heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, careful footsteps with the squeak of wheels. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, the old janitor who cleaned the school every evening. Jake had seen her 1,000 times but never really talked to her. "Hey there, young man," Mrs. Rodriguez said softly, pushing her cart into the classroom. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Jake quickly tried to hide the test paper, but it was too late. Mrs. Rodriguez had already seen it. "Another bad grade?" the janitor asked, not in a mean way, but with kindness in her voice. Jake nodded, feeling embarrassed. Here he was, the son of one of the richest men in the world, and he couldn't even pass a simple test. Mrs. Rodriguez set down her mop and looked directly at Jake. "You know, son, I've been watching you for 3 years now. Every day I see you struggling. Every day I see you trying so hard. But I also see something else." Jake looked up, confused. "I see a smart boy who's been trying to learn the wrong way this whole time." The janitor's words hung in the air like a secret waiting to be told. Jake felt his heart beating faster. "What do you mean?" Jake whispered. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled mysteriously and glanced around to make sure they were alone. "What I'm about to tell you changed my whole life when I was your age. But first, I need to know, are you ready to hear a secret that could change everything?" Jake's heart pounded as he stared at Mrs. Rodriguez. Part of him wanted to run away, but something in her eyes made him stay. She looked so sure, so calm, like she really did know something that could help him. "Yes," Jake whispered. "Please tell me." Mrs. Rodriguez pulled up a chair and sat down next to him. Her voice became very quiet, like she was sharing the most important secret in the world. "Jake, when I was 13 years old, I was just like you. I failed every test, every single one. My parents thought I was stupid. My teachers gave up on me. I thought I would never amount to anything." Jake's eyes grew wide. This couldn't be true. Mrs. Rodriguez was just a janitor. How could she understand what it felt like to be him? "But you're a—" Jake started to say, then stopped. He didn't want to be rude. Mrs. Rodriguez laughed softly. "A janitor? Yes, I am now. But Jake, what I'm about to tell you will shock you. Before I became a janitor, I was a brain surgeon." Jake's mouth fell open. "What? That's impossible." "I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. I operated on people's brains for 20 years. I saved hundreds of lives. But none of that would have happened if I hadn't learned the secret I'm about to share with you." Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. Mrs. Rodriguez, the quiet woman who mopped floors and emptied trash cans, used to be a brain surgeon? It seemed like something from a movie. "Why are you a janitor now if you used to save lives?" Jake asked. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes became sad for a moment. "That's a story for another day. Right now, what matters is helping you. Because, Jake, the secret I learned changed everything about how my brain worked. It made me go from failing every test to becoming one of the smartest people in my class." She leaned closer to Jake, her voice becoming even quieter. "The secret is this. Your brain isn't broken, Jake. You're not stupid. You just learn differently than everyone else. And once you know how you learn, you'll be unstoppable." Jake felt a tiny spark of hope in his chest. But he was still confused. "What do you mean I learned differently?" Mrs. Rodriguez stood up and walked to the whiteboard. She picked up a marker and drew a simple picture of a brain. Most kids learn by reading words or listening to teachers talk. But some kids, special kids, like you and me, learn by seeing pictures and moving around. We learn by touching things and building things. She turned back to Jake with a knowing smile. Tell me, Jake, when you play video games, do you remember every detail? Every secret passage? Every character's power? Jake nodded quickly. He knew everything about his favorite games. He could draw maps of every level from memory. And when you build with Lego blocks or fix things with your hands, does time just fly by? Again, Jake nodded. He loved building and taking things apart. His father always got angry about it, calling it a waste of time. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled bigger. That's because you have a special kind of brain, Jake. A builder's brain, a hands-on brain. But your school only teaches to reading brains and listening brains. Jake felt his heart beating faster. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from excitement. So what's the secret? He asked. Mrs. Rodriguez checked her watch, and her face suddenly became worried. Oh no, Jake, your father will be here in 1 hour. We don't have much time. She grabbed Jake's arm, gently, but urgently. Meet me in the science lab tomorrow morning, before school starts. 6:30 sharp. What I'm going to show you there will change your life forever. But Jake, her voice became very serious. You cannot tell anyone about this. Not your father, not your teachers, not your friends. This has to be our secret until you're ready. Do you promise? Jake nodded eagerly. But as Mrs. Rodriguez packed up her cleaning cart and started to leave, he suddenly felt scared again. Wait! He called out. What if it doesn't work? What if I'm just too stupid to ever get better? Mrs. Rodriguez stopped at the door and looked back at him with the kindest smile he had ever seen. Jake, in 6 months, you won't just be passing your tests. You'll be getting A's. And 1 year from now, you'll be the smartest kid in your class. I promise you this. She started to walk away, then turned back one more time. But there's something else you need to know. Something I haven't told you yet. Tomorrow, I'll explain why your father can never find out about our meetings. Because if he does, Jake, it won't just ruin your chances of success. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. It could destroy everything. Jake barely slept that night. His mind kept spinning with questions. How could a brain surgeon become a janitor? What was so dangerous about his father finding out? And most importantly, could Mrs. Rodriguez really help him stop failing? At 6:20 in the morning, Jake snuck through the empty school hallways. His heart was pounding as he pushed open the science lab door. Mrs. Rodriguez was already there, but she looked different. Instead of her janitor clothes, she wore a white lab coat. On the table in front of her were strange tools, colorful blocks, and what looked like pieces of a brain model. You came, she said with a smile. I wasn't sure you would. Mrs. Rodriguez, you look like a real doctor, Jake said, staring at her in amazement. That's because I am a real doctor, Jake. Or at least, I was. Her smile faded a little. Sit down. Before we begin your training, you need to know the whole truth about why I'm here. Jake sat down, feeling nervous again. Mrs. Rodriguez picked up a photograph from the table. It showed a younger version of herself in a hospital, wearing doctor clothes and smiling next to a little boy. This picture was taken 15 years ago. That little boy had a brain tumor. The other doctors said there was no hope, that he would die. But I believed I could save him. I spent 3 days straight operating on his brain, trying a new method that nobody had ever tried before. Jake leaned forward. Did you save him? Yes, Mrs. Rodriguez said quietly. The operation was a complete success. The boy lived. He grew up healthy and strong. But here's the part that changed everything, Jake. That little boy was the son of a very powerful man. A man who owned hospitals and controlled who could work as doctors. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What happened? The powerful man didn't want anyone to know that I had saved his son using a method the other doctors said was impossible. He was afraid it would make him and his doctor friends look bad. So he made sure I could never work as a doctor again. He spread lies about me. He made it so no hospital would hire me. Mrs. Rodriguez's hands were shaking slightly as she continued. I lost everything, Jake. My career, my reputation, my life's work. I had to take this job as a janitor just to survive. But do you know what kept me going all these years? Jake shook his head. The hope that one day I would find another child who needed help the way that little boy did. A child whose mind worked differently, who was struggling in a system that didn't understand them. She looked directly into Jake's eyes. That child is you, Jake. Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. But they weren't sad tears. For the first time in his life, someone believed in him. But Mrs. Rodriguez, what does this have to do with my father? Why can't he know? Mrs. Rodriguez's face became very serious. Jake, the powerful man who destroyed my career. His name was William Roberts, but 15 years ago he changed his last name. Do you know what he changed it to? He'll make sure I disappear completely. And worse, he might hurt you too, just to keep his secret safe. The room spun around Jake. His father, the man he looked up to despite everything, had destroyed this kind woman's life? That's impossible, Jake said, but his voice sounded weak even to himself. Mrs. Rodriguez pulled out an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Miracle Doctor Loses License After Controversy." Below it was a picture of his father, but younger, standing outside a courthouse. Your father has spent 15 years making sure no one remembers what really happened. He's built his fortune on lies, Jake, but I've been waiting for the right moment to help someone he cares about. Someone who could show the world who he really island. Jake's hands were shaking now. Are you saying you want me to help you get revenge on my father? No, Jake. I don't want revenge. I want justice. But more than that, I want to help you become the amazing person I know you can be. Your father may have hurt me, but that doesn't mean I want to hurt you. She reached across the table and took Jake's hand. The question is, Jake, are you brave enough to let me help you? Even knowing the truth about your father? Even knowing the danger we'll both be in if he finds out? Jake looked at the brain model on the table, then at the tools, then back at Mrs. Rodriguez's kind but determined face. What exactly are you asking me to do? Mrs. Rodriguez smiled, but there was something scary in her eyes now. I'm asking you to trust me completely, Jake. To meet me here every morning for the next 3 months. I'm going to teach you secrets about learning that will make you smarter than you ever dreamed possible. But in return, she paused, and Jake felt his heart stop. In return, when you're ready, when you're strong enough, I need you to help me prove what your father did to me. I need you to help me get my life back. The morning sunlight streamed through the lab windows, and Jake could hear other students starting to arrive at school. He had to make a choice right now. Trust this woman who said she could change his life, or run away and keep failing forever. But as he looked into Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes, he saw something that terrified him. He saw that she wasn't just offering to help him. She was planning something much bigger, something that would change both their lives forever. And there was no turning back. 3 weeks had passed since Jake made his choice in the science lab. Every morning at 6:30, he met Mrs. Rodriguez in secret, and something incredible was happening. Something that seemed impossible. Jake was getting smarter, not just a little bit smarter. He was becoming brilliant. The first thing Mrs. Rodriguez taught him was about his hands. Your brain connects to your fingers, she explained. When you move your hands while you learn, your brain remembers everything. She was right. When Jake studied math by building number problems with blocks, instead of writing them on paper, the answers just appeared in his mind. When he learned history by acting out battles with toy soldiers, he could remember every date and every name. But the most amazing thing happened when Mrs. Rodriguez brought in a 3D model of the human heart. Touch it, Jake. Take it apart. Put it back together, she said. As Jake's fingers moved over the model, something magical happened in his brain. He could suddenly see how blood flowed through the body. He understood how the heart worked better than kids who had been studying it for months. "This is incredible," Jake whispered, putting the heart back together perfectly. "I can see it all in my mind." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled proudly. "That's because you have a gift, Jake. A very special kind of intelligence that most people don't understand." But Jake's happiness was about to be shattered. That afternoon, Jake walked into his English class feeling confident. For the first time in years, Mrs. Peterson handed out a surprise test on the book they had been reading. Jake looked at the test and smiled. Using Mrs. Rodriguez's methods, he had studied this book by drawing pictures of each scene and acting out the characters. He knew he could ace this test. He finished in 20 minutes and handed it in. Mrs. Peterson looked surprised. Jake had never finished a test early before. The next day, Mrs. Peterson called Jake to her desk after class. "Jake, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." Jake's heart started beating faster. "Yes, Mrs. Peterson? Did someone help you with this test? Did you cheat?" Jake stared at her in shock. "No! I studied really hard. I promise I didn't cheat." Mrs. Peterson held up his test paper. There was a big red A+ at the top. "Jake, this isn't just a good test. This is a perfect test. You understood things about this book that even I didn't think about. 3 weeks ago, you were failing my class. Now you're writing like a college student." Jake felt panic rising in his chest. He couldn't tell her about Mrs. Rodriguez. He had promised to keep it secret. I just studied differently this time," he stammered. Mrs. Peterson's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, differently?" "I can't tell you. I'm sorry, but I can't." Mrs. Peterson leaned back in her chair. "Jake, I'm going to have to call your father. This kind of sudden improvement doesn't happen without explanation. Either someone is helping you cheat, or something else is going on that I need to know about." Jake felt the world spinning around him. If his father found out about the secret meetings, Mrs. Rodriguez would be in terrible danger. But if he didn't explain his improvement, everyone would think he was cheating. "Please don't call my father," Jake begged. "I'll take a harder test right now to prove I'm not cheating." Mrs. Peterson thought for a moment. "All right, I'll give you one chance. Tomorrow after school, you'll take a completely different test on the same book. If you pass it, I'll believe you. But if you fail—" "I understand," Jake said quickly. But as Jake left the classroom, his hands were shaking. He had less than 24 hours to prove he wasn't cheating, and he couldn't use any of Mrs. Rodriguez's special methods because Mrs. Peterson would be watching him the entire time. That evening, Jake tried to study the old way, the way he used to. He sat at his desk and read the same page over and over again. The words blurred together. Nothing made sense. It was like his brain had forgotten how to learn the normal way. He was going to fail the test tomorrow. Mrs. Peterson would call his father. His father would demand answers. And somehow, he would discover the truth about Mrs. Rodriguez. Jake put his head in his hands and wanted to cry. For 3 weeks, he had felt like a genius. Now, he felt stupid again. But then he remembered something Mrs. Rodriguez had said. "When you feel trapped, Jake, that's when your real strength shows." Jake looked at his clock. It was almost midnight, but he had an idea. A crazy, dangerous idea. He snuck out of his house and rode his bike through the dark streets to the school. Using a trick Mrs. Rodriguez had taught him, he got inside through a basement window. The science lab was dark and empty, but Jake knew where Mrs. Rodriguez kept her special learning materials. He found the 3D models, the building blocks, and the art supplies. Working by the light of his phone, Jake spent the next 4 hours recreating the entire story from the book, using clay figures and cardboard sets. He built the main character's house. He sculpted the faces of every person in the story. He drew maps of every place mentioned in the book. As his hands worked, his brain absorbed everything. Every detail, Every emotion, every hidden meaning in the story became crystal clear to him. By morning, Jake understood that book better than anyone in his class ever could. But as he snuck back home just as the sun was rising, Jake didn't know that someone had been watching him all night. Someone who had followed him to the school. Someone who had taken pictures of everything he did. And that someone was about to change everything. As Jake walked into school that morning, feeling confident about his test, he didn't notice the black car parked across the street. He didn't see the man in the expensive suit talking on his phone. And he definitely didn't hear the man say the words that would destroy everything. "Sir, I found her, and she's been meeting with your son." Jake walked into Mrs. Peterson's classroom that afternoon, feeling ready for his test. He had spent the night building and creating, and now the book lived inside his mind like a movie he could replay whenever he wanted. But as he sat down at his desk, the classroom door burst open. His father, Robert Williams, stormed in, wearing his expensive black suit. Behind him walked the man Jake had seen in the hallway earlier, a private detective with cold, unfriendly eyes. "Dad?" Jake said, confused and scared. "What are you doing here?" Robert Williams looked at his son with a mixture of anger and disappointment that Jake had never seen before. "Stand up, Jake. We're leaving. Now." Mrs. Peterson looked shocked. "Mr. Williams, Jake is about to take an important test. He needs to—" "My son won't be taking any more tests at this school," Robert said coldly. "We're transferring him immediately." Jake felt panic shooting through his body. "Dad, please! I can explain everything! I wasn't cheating, I swear!" Robert Williams walked closer to Jake, his voice becoming dangerously quiet. "Oh, I know you weren't cheating, son. I know exactly what you've been doing. And I know exactly who you've been meeting with." Jake's blood turned to ice. His father knew about Mrs. Rodriguez. "Dad, please. She was just helping me learn." "Helping you?" Robert's voice got louder. "Do you have any idea who that woman really is? Do you know what she's capable of?" Before Jake could answer, there was a commotion in the hallway. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, but she wasn't wearing her janitor clothes anymore. She was wearing a doctor's coat, and her eyes were blazing with 15 years of anger. "Hello, William," she said calmly. "Or should I call you Robert now?" Robert Williams turned around slowly, and Jake saw something he had never seen in his father's eyes before: fear. "Maria Rodriguez," Robert said. "I should have known you'd come back eventually." "You destroyed my life," Mrs. Rodriguez said, walking into the room. "You made sure I could never practice medicine again. You stole my career, my reputation, everything I worked for." Jake looked back and forth between them, trying to understand what was happening. "You deserved what happened to you," Robert said angrily. "You were reckless. You could have killed my—" "I saved your son's life," Mrs. Rodriguez shouted. "When every other doctor said he was going to die, I found a way to save him. And you punished me for it because you were embarrassed that a woman had succeeded where your fancy doctor friends had failed." Jake's mind was spinning. "Dad, she saved someone's life?" Robert Williams looked at Jake with pain in his eyes. "She saved your older brother's life, Jake. The brother you never knew you had." The room went completely silent. Jake felt like he couldn't breathe. "I have a brother?" Jake whispered. Mrs. Rodriguez's angry expression softened as she looked at Jake. "Your brother Daniel was born when you were just a baby, Jake. He had a brain tumor that should have killed him. Your father was so ashamed that his son needed help, and so angry that I was the only doctor who could provide it, that after I saved Daniel's life, he sent him away to live with relatives. He never let you meet your own brother." Jake stared at his father in horror. "You sent my brother away? You made me grow up alone?" "I was protecting both of you," Robert shouted. "If people knew about Daniel's condition, if they knew how much we needed help—" "You were protecting your pride," Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. "And you were so determined to hide the truth that you destroyed my career and separated two brothers who should have grown up together." Jake felt tears streaming down his face, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of anger. "Where is he?" Jake demanded. "Where is my brother?" Mrs. Rodriguez smiled for the first time since entering the room. "He's waiting outside in the hallway, Jake. I brought him with me." She walked to the door and motioned for someone to come in. A teenage boy, about 16 years old, stepped into the classroom. He had Jake's eyes and Jake's smile, and when he looked at Jake, his face lit up with joy. "Hey, little brother," Daniel said softly. "I've been waiting my whole life to meet you." Jake ran across the room and hugged Daniel tightly. For the first time in his life, Jake felt complete. He had a brother, he had family. Robert Williams watched his two sons embrace, and Jake could see that his father was crying now too. "I'm sorry," Robert whispered. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong about everything." Mrs. Rodriguez walked over to Robert, and her voice became gentle. "William, Robert, I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to help Jake because I could see that he has the same kind of special mind that Daniel has, the same kind of mind that I have. We all learn differently, but that doesn't make us less smart. It makes us more creative." She looked at Jake with pride. In 3 weeks, Jake went from failing every test to understanding subjects better than students twice his age. Not because I'm magic, but because I taught him how his brain actually works. Robert looked at his son with amazement. "You really got smarter?" Jake nodded, wiping his tears. "Mrs. Rodriguez taught me that I'm not stupid, Dad. I just learn by building things and touching things instead of just reading. When I use my hands, my brain remembers everything." Robert Williams looked at Mrs. Rodriguez with new respect. "Can you forgive me? Can you help me understand how to support Jake properly?" Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. "I've spent 15 years waiting for this moment, Robert. Not to get revenge, but to prove that different kinds of minds can do amazing things when they're given the right support." She turned to Jake. "And Jake, now that your father knows the truth, we don't have to meet in secret anymore. We can teach other kids who learn like you do. We can help them discover how brilliant they really are." Jake looked around the room at his father, his newfound brother, Mrs. Rodriguez, and even Mrs. Peterson, who was watching everything with tears in her eyes. "So what happens now?" Jake asked. Daniel put his arm around Jake's shoulder. "Now, little brother, we get to be a real family, and Dad is going to help Mrs. Rodriguez open a special school for kids who learn the way we do." Robert Williams nodded, looking ashamed but determined. "It's the least I can do. Mrs. Rodriguez, I want to give you back everything I took away from you. Your reputation, your career, everything." Mrs. Rodriguez looked at Jake and Daniel standing together, and her smile was brighter than the Sunday. "You already have, Robert. You gave me the chance to help your son discover his true potential. And now, Jake isn't just going to pass his tests. He's going to change the world." Jake looked at his hands, the hands that could build and create and learn in ways he never knew were possible. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of failing. Because he had finally learned the most important secret of all. He was never broken. He was just different. And different was exactly what the world needed. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and comment. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more amazing stories.